Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Beckham. I do try to make good quality, easy to follow video tutorials, and there are some costs attached to this. A quality microphone, a mixer, software, website costs, and of course a fair amount of time too. All my content is now free to download from my website or to be viewed on YouTube. If my videos have helped you, a small donation via PayPal would be gratefully appreciated, but it's not essential. There are PayPal donate links on the video download pages of my website. The parent and child relationship within PTE-AV-Studio opens up a lot of possibilities, and it's well worth learning. Let's take a look to see if we can help that learning process along. If we wish to animate two images simultaneously on screen, we have a choice to make. Do we want the animation of these images to be completely independent of each other, or do we want to link their animation, and in this case we would call that parent and child? Let's take a look at both options so we can easily recognize the parent and child relationship just by looking at the image icons in the bottom right corner of the Objects and Animation screen. If we want our two images to be independent of one another, then we need to deselect one of them before we bring in the second. And when we do that, the icons down in the bottom right corner of the Objects and Animation screen will look quite different, whether they are completely independent images or parent and child. As you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I've got an image in place which I'm just going to use as a background for two inset images that we're going to animate independently of each other. So let's look at something that isn't parent and child to start with. But whenever we open up an image into the Objects and Animation screen, we'll notice that it's automatically selected. We can see that in the bottom right corner by the blue highlight. We can also see it in the mini player above with that bounding box around the outer edge. So if I went to my icon to add an image now, the image that I brought in would end up being a child of a parent, and the parent in our case would be the background. That's not what I want to achieve, and that's why in previous videos you've often heard me say, let's remove the bounding box or deselect the background by clicking into the grey area. Then I'm going to click and go and select one of my seagull images. Now of course, if I'm going to display two images over this background, I could have selected both images together. But I think for the sake of what I'm trying to demonstrate here, it may be more helpful if we do them one at a time. So what I'm going to do with my first gull image here is just to click and drag over the zoom X to reduce the size. I want to move it over to the left a little bit because I want another square image to sit on the right, and I'll get the positions a little bit more accurate a little bit later. I may wish to go to the properties and put a border on here, and I'm just going to stay with a default border and a default shadow just to speed things up a bit. Now once again, if I went straight up to the top left and I went to bring in the second image would end up being a child of a parent, and in our case the parent would be this seagull image because this is the one that's selected. So here, because the two images need to be animated completely independently of one another, that's when we click into the grey area, or we can click into the box down at the bottom right, and in fact to save going right up to the top left of the screen we can right click here, add an image, and I'll pick a second one of those gull images. Now what I can do here, if I switch back to my animation tab for a moment and I just look at gull 2, I can see that I set a zoom of 7.6. So it may help just to go to gull 1 and put 7/6 in there. At least I know it's the same size. Let's put in place the border and also the shadow. And when I go back to my animation tab, I could do the same thing with the pan. If I look at goal 2, I can see my pan is -41. So if I select goal 1, I could position that by putting 41 into the value. I can now see that I need to fine tune these two, move this one a little bit to the right and this one a little bit to the left. I'll go ahead and do that. Now the important part we need to look at is down at the bottom right corner. If I select the background just for a moment, we can quite clearly see that these two layers are completely independent of one another. When we create the parent and child, the child will be linked to this one and it will be slightly offset. Once you see it, then it's quite obvious. But what I could do here, I can select each one of these and I can animate them independently of each other. So let's add a little bit of animation into both of these. I'm going to select goal 1 and 2 and both keyframes. These keyframes represent the endpoint at the moment, so instead of using them as the first keyframes, I'll slide them to the right and create others in front of them. Alt Insert and select goal 2 and Alt Insert. And what we can do is just put a bit of independent animation in here just to demonstrate what we're trying to do. So let's take goal 1. There it is. I'm going to bring that just out of the frame there and maybe give it a little bit of rotate Y, something like that. Goal 2, I'll do the same thing. Just take it off the frame and a little bit of rotation, something like that. Of course, if we were going to do something like this, we need to add some speed too. So here, because we're starting with the animation off screen, and this is all irrelevant in relation to the parent and child, but it needs to be done, so let's make sure we cross the T's and dot the I's, so to speak. So I'm panning. Animation speed needs to be slowed down. I'm not zooming, but sometimes I add that anyway. But I am rotating, so once again, slow down. Then I'll do the same for goal 1. So the animation we've created here is completely independent. Putting the cursor back to the start and pressing play. There we can see the animation, and of course we could have had one image coming from above, one image coming from the left. You name it, you choose the animation, but you can do so independently with those two. And of course, you're not limited to just 2 images. Now, what I'd like to do next is to select both of those images and delete them. Now you can see the bounding box has reappeared around the background, so once again, I'm going to have to remove that by clicking into the grey area, but I'm going to go to add an image. And just to demonstrate that this is possible, I'll select 3 images. Click Open. The important thing I want to draw your attention to is how they look down at the bottom right. Every one of these is independent to each other. Let's take a look next at the parent and child. So what I have in the slide list here is a blank to start and just a slightly out of focus background, which I've set to a 16-second slide duration. So with that image selected, I'm going to open up the Objects and Animation screen. Now as you can see here, the screen has opened up and I've got what we could call an automatic selection on my background. But although I'm demonstrating the parent and child relationship, I don't want that parent and child relationship with my background. The background needs to remain independent. So to bring in the first image, which I'll make my parent, I need to click into the grey area here or down at the bottom right to deselect this background. Now let's go and get the image. So the image I require first, I've actually called parent. So I'm going to double click to select that. I'm going to quickly just resize it a little bit. I'll jump to the Properties tab and put on the default border and the default shadow, and jump back into the animation screen. But what I'd like to do here is to do just a quick bit of animation. So if we was going to have a starting point about there, what are we talking of there? We're talking about 4 seconds. I'm going to hit Alt Insert a little bit further along. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that'll do. We don't need it to be absolutely accurate for this, it's just a demonstration. But if I put my cursor back on the first keyframe, let's have the animation starting off the screen on the left and maybe up a bit. Now we're going to need speed for something like this, so although it's not a part of the parent and child relationship, it's still important. And when I show you a little demo, I like the demos to look right. So I'm going to go to my Add Modifier, slow down. I'm going to put it on the pan, zoom and the rotate because I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with the animation yet, but whatever I do, I now know I've got the correct speed. So if we could just have a quick look at that. That's the animation we're going to see. It's just going to drop onto the center of the screen. So the next thing we need to do is to select the child. Now the most important thing here, of course, is we have to make sure that the parent image, or the image we wish to be the parent, is selected. We can see it is by the bounding box, so I'm going to go to my Add an Image icon. And I'm going to add child 1. We can add more than one child to a parent, and we can do it simultaneously. I could add 2 or 3, but here we'll just stick to 1 for the moment, and I'll click OK. Now we can already see the parent and child relationship working, because when I introduced my parent, it filled the entire screen. When I introduced the child, it's taken exactly the same size as the parent. And when we look over to the bottom right side, we can quite clearly see that there's a staggered effect with the little icons here, and that instantly tells us that even if these weren't labeled, that this is the child of the parent. Now it doesn't stop me from adjusting the child, because we're unlikely to want the child to sit right over the top of the image, or certainly not in the demonstration I'm doing. But we only really want the one keyframe because the animation is confined here to the parent, not the child. Where the parent goes, the child will follow. So all I would need to do here with the child is just adjust it to make it look pleasant. So let's do that. I'll make it slightly smaller. I'll quickly jump to the properties and add a border so it looks very similar, and back to the animation tab. I may want to bring it over to the right, I may want to bring it down, and of course we've got the opportunity to give it a nice little angle if we wanted to with Rotate Y. Now if I were to put my cursor back right at the start of the animation, please ignore the little problem up at the top left, we'll fix that in a moment. When I press play, when we get to the 4-second point, the parent will come on screen and it'll bring the child with it. And of course, because I have placed the child in that position, then I need to take account of that when I adjust the parent animation. So to fix that, I need to, maybe I'd like to fix the end point too, because now I put two images together, maybe they could be positioned slightly better than they are when they come to the end of the animation. For example, if I select my parent, because that's the only one that's animated here, and I select the end point, I could decide perhaps that it looks a little bit more attractive, something like that. But it's not going to help too much when I start the animation. We're still going to see a little bit showing on the left hand side, and to fix that I could just move it out slightly. But of course we can do anything we wish here. We could put some animation in with the Rotate Y, C, Y, X, anything we wish. And let's take one more look at that in its entirety. So when we get to the 4-second point, in comes the parent with the child. Remember, we can put as many children alongside the parent as we have the need. So there's quite a bit of scope that we have here with the parent and child relationship. But I was pretty fortunate here that the image that I've chosen to make my child covers up a part of the image that's not important. Supposing this image here covered up a part of this image that was important, and I had the need here to have this bird image to be behind this one. In this particular instance, because this bird fills the frame, that's not going to work too well from a visual point of view, but from a technical point of view, then I think I can demonstrate how we do that, because what we need to do is switch them around. We need to make this the parent and this the child. Now, because I've only got 2 images here, we're probably better off resetting up the whole parent and child relationship, but doing this the other way round. This image needs to become our parent and this image needs to become our child, but they can still sit in these same positions. The only thing it's going to change is this image is going to sit behind this one. Now, by the magic of video and to speed the process up, I'm going to do exactly that. Now, as you can see by the spinning round of the screen, I have managed to get that image that formed the child in the previous example. I've got it down at the bottom right corner, and now it's tucked behind the image we created as the parent. And I've managed to do that and not lose any of the image. But of course it does make the little box down the right corner look a little bit odd now, because I labelled my images parent and child, and now they're working in complete reverse. The one I've got labelled child 1 is now the parent, and the one I've got labelled parent is now the child. Now, of course, we can easily change that, but I've really caused this confusion myself by naming the images parent and child. Should you wish to change the labels down in the bottom right corner, then select the one you want, go to your properties, and up here I could change that to parent and this one to child, and now we're looking a little bit more normal. And I think if I put my cursor at the start and press play, you can see what I've created here. But the object of the exercise, of course, was to simply tuck the second bird picture, or what was our original child, behind the image on top rather than overlapping it. The rotating cube in PTE-AV-Studio's slide styles is a great example. It's parent and child that allows this cube to be created. A parent frame holds side 1 and 2 of the cube in their rightful place. A second parent frame does the same for sides 3 and 4, and a third parent frame does this for sides 5 and 6. If you study the cube in the Objects and Animation screen, you'll notice that all 3 parent frames are controlled by a fourth parent frame. Now, I suppose we could call that a grandparent, because that just controls the rotation of the other 3 frames, and of course within those 3 frames are the 6 children, the 6 sides of the cube. A parent can be an image, a video, a frame, text, a rectangle, or any object we choose. Now, we can also create the parent and child as an afterthought. And I've had to do this many times, where I start an animation project, and then as I get a little more ambitious, I realize I could have used a controlling frame as a parent. And perhaps we have a good example of that here. Suppose with our 2 square images here, we wanted them independently animated onto the screen, as we've just seen, but we then decide we'd like them removed together. A frame used as a parent is going to allow us to do that. So applying a frame to the two gull images here means we need to deselect anything down at the bottom right corner by clicking into the box, right-clicking and adding a frame. Once we've got the frame, I can select both the gull 2 and the gull 1, right-click those and cut them, then select my frame, right-click and paste. Now that's not going to affect the animation we created at all, because we've got no animation other than the original keyframe created with frame 1. But now we could remove both of those images from the screen together. Now to demonstrate this, I think I need just a little more slide time here. So I'm going to go down to my slide options, go to my main tab, and I'll just push this up to 20 seconds for demo purposes. So there we've got the images coming onto the screen. So what we may want to do now is look at the keyframes for gull 1 and 2. In fact, we can select those two, but we can also select the frame, because there's the keyframe automatically created for the frame. So we don't really want anything to happen until the images are nicely on screen and we've had a few seconds to observe them. The second keyframe of the gull is on 8 seconds, so let's say somewhere around about 12 seconds. What I'd like to do now is to remove these two images both together. I'd need 2 keyframes for that, one to start the animation and one to end it. And of course I've got to decide, do I want the ending to be within the fade of the next image or not? All personal choices. On this occasion I'll just right click and clone a keyframe. So 12, 13, 14, we've got about 15 seconds. Let's just move it up a little bit more. So if I select this keyframe, now I can decide exactly what I want to happen between there and there. Just to give us something to look at, I'm going to reduce the zoom, and because I'm reducing the zoom of the frame, my gull 1 and 2 is going to go with that reduction. And I'm going to go to my rotate Y, and I'm going to spin my image as it disappears into the distance. In fact, I think I'll zoom right the way out. I'll drop that to 0. So putting my cursor back at the start here, by adding that parent frame as an afterthought, we now have what we was trying to achieve, which is to bring 2 independent images onto the screen. We view them for the number of seconds we want to view them, but then they're moved off the screen. There's only one thing missing with that last bit of animation, and that is speed. Now looking at the keyframes for that controlling frame, the second keyframe that ends the animation occurs before the image fades off screen. So we would need to select the first keyframe of these two, and the speed option we're most likely to put in there would be smooth, because we're going to see both the start and the end. If I had changed my mind and I wanted maybe slightly longer for the images to be on screen, but I was quite happy for them to rotate and zoom out and disappear into the fade of the next image, then of course the speed options I'm likely to choose here are going to be accelerate. So I'd go to my pan, animation speed, accelerate, same with the zoom, and same with the rotate. And then I'll put my cursor just before that position, and we'll see a nice gentle start, but of course it will speed up, but most of that will be fading out and the next image will be appearing on screen. In one of my demonstrations earlier on, you may recall seeing text applied to images where those images also contained a little 3D rotation, as you can see with the dicky bird up on the top left and the blue-faced honeyeater on the bottom right. In this situation, the parent and child relationship can help us to present the text at the same angle as the image. To do that, we just need to select the image first and apply the text option as a child. Then we choose the font size, the font color, and the font style. Let's bring this video to a close by applying just a little bit of extra text to the child 1 image, which is the one at the top left. Now we can already see that I've applied some text to it, and you can also see I didn't know the name of this bird, but that's another story. But I can add another image to this child 1, but I can also add more text. And the crucial thing, as always, if we're going for parent and child, is to make sure one of them is selected, right click, and then I can add some text. But perhaps there's a better way of doing this. Because we've already made some text here, why don't we make use of the color, font and size of that? Because it's a good chance that if I wanted to add more text to that top left image, I'm going to want exactly the same font style. Maybe not, but I think it's a good bet. In that case, I can just select child 1 text, right click and choose copy. Then I can select child 1, right click and paste. Now all I've got to do is to go and identify the keyframe that's created, although I've got to move my cursor here so I can see what I'm doing, but the keyframe is selected. Now I can go to my pan controls. I could put the text on the bottom right, or I could put it at the top right, and to adjust it, of course, I would go to my properties, highlight, and just overtype whatever I wanted the viewer to read. So there we have the parent and child relationship. And what's good about it in relation to the text we've applied to child 1, that top left image, is if we got creative all of a sudden and we wanted to go to our rotate commands here, and we wanted to rotate the image or change its orientation with the rotate Y or the X, you can see that the text just follows the parent. In this case, the picture of the little bird, but the text becomes the child. If you've been watching this video on YouTube, can I encourage you to subscribe to my channel? And if you hit that notification bell, you'll be informed whenever I put up new content. I'll see you next time.